Chapter 1251. Tang Wulin's heart stirred slightly, and he quickly followed along behind Li Yan. From the aura emanating from this man's body, Tang Wulin could sense that he was most likely at or above the hyper Douluo level. Even with his current level of soul power, he was unable to ascertain Li Yan's exact cultivation rank. There really was more to the Tang sect than meets the eye. At the same time, he could tell that Li Yan wasn't taking him very seriously, most likely because he had discovered that Tang Wulin was only a soul sage. Zhang Xin had introduced Li Yan to Tang Wulin as a veteran member of the Tang sect. As the Tang sect supervisor of the Dou Spirit Empire, he ranked alongside the Tang sect's inner hall masters. He had been working at the Dou Spirit Empire for over 30 years, and was a very well-respected figure in the sect. Furthermore, he was an extremely powerful soul master as well. The Tang sect's main sources of financial income included production and selling of soul weapons, research and development in soul technology, as well as control over and distribution of resources. Due to the shortage of resources on the Douluo continent, the prices of uncommon metals on the Douluo continent are far higher than those of the other two continents. This was the core reason behind the Douluo continent's eagerness to start a war. Hence, the Tang sect naturally purchased most of its resources from the Dou Spirit continent and Douluo continent. One of the main contributing factors behind the Tang sect's lofty status on these two continents lay in the fact that it had brought some important pieces of soul technology to these two continents. The Douluo Federation was made aware of this through certain avenues, but all of the technology that was provided to these two continents stemmed from the Tang sect itself, so the Federation couldn't accuse the Tang sect of anything. On top of that, the Tang sect had extremely close ties with Shrek Academy, and even the Federation didn't dare to incur the wrath of these two super organizations. This was undoubtedly a key factor behind the sudden bombing of Shrek Academy. Of course, the Tang sect hadn't sold its most advanced technology to the other two continents. Both the Tang sect and Shrek Academy were lovers of peace. With the abundance of resources on the Douluo continent and Dou Spirit continent, if their soul technology were to outstrip that of the Douluo Federation, then there was a possibility that they could declare war on the Douluo continent instead. After all, these two empires were once part of the Douluo continent as well, and their rulers were constantly searching for an opportunity to unite the three continents as one again, under their rule, of course. As such, the Tang sect shared a delicate relationship with these two continents. They were close partners, but their partnership was limited at the same time. The two empires had no choice but to rely on the Tang sect, but they were also constantly trying to get more out of the Tang sect as well. Tang Wulin's mission for this trip was to represent the Tang sect and give these two empires enough weapons so they could intimidate the Douluo Federation into having second thoughts about starting a war. However, he also had to moderate and ensure that the two empires weren't so buoyed by the influx of weapons that they became the ones eager to start a war. Zhang Xin had told Tang Wulin that Li Yan was extremely powerful and capable, but he was rather conceited and would only obey someone he felt to be worthy. As such, earning Li Yan's allegiance was the first problem that Tang Wulin would have to overcome as the Tang sect's master. There were already two large soul vehicles waiting by the roadside, and Shrek's 7 monsters and the 7 people from the Dou Spirit Empire's Tang sect branches got in the first vehicle, while everyone else got in the second one. Li Yan didn't do or say anything as everyone got into the vehicle, and only after they had all taken a seat did he turn his gaze toward Tang Wulin. We'll be setting off now, sect master. It'll take around 5 hours for us to get to Heaven Dou City, and you can ask me anything you like during that time. He was prompting Tang Wulin to ask him questions rather than informing Tang Wulin of the situation here, and that alone was sufficient testament to his conceited nature. Sure. Tang Wulin didn't pay much heed to this and remained unbothered by Li Yan's attitude. He was simply far too young, after all, and if he were in Li Yan's shoes, he would also be quite skeptical towards such a young sect master. However, Tang Wulin didn't ask Li Yan any questions and merely cast his gaze out the window to appraise the scenery outside. They drove along a dirt path for around 20 minutes before finally arriving onto a main road. The road wasn't particularly wide, and the surrounding area was clearly yet to be developed with clusters of unruly plants growing as far as the eyes could see. Some information surrounding the Dou Spirit continent surfaced in Tang Wulin's mind. Compared to the Douluo continent, the Dou Spirit continent had actually been developed earlier, and the remaining citizens of the past Dou Spirit Empire had traveled to this continent over 10,000 years ago. At the time, they were already a completely spent force, and it was said that a total of less than 10,000 of them had arrived on this continent, carrying a pitiful amount of resources. Most importantly, they didn't have enough talent in any of the major fields, which was why they were lagging behind the Douluo Empire, which had voluntarily immigrated to the Douluo continent with a population of millions. Hence, even though the Douluo continent had been developed far later than the Dou Spirit continent, it was actually far more advanced in comparison. After all, they had far more resources and skilled personnel with them when they first immigrated to the new continent. Looking at it now, this was indeed the case. The Dou Spirit continent was indeed the least developed of the three continents, and it also had the smallest area of the three. This meant that there was going to be a more enormous reserve of resources to be exploited on this continent. Tang Wulin continued to look out the window in silence, and the atmosphere in the vehicle became a little subdued. Li Yan was sitting on the seat next to Tang Wulin, and he was slightly surprised by the composure of this young sect master. Back when he had received instructions from amorous Douluo Zhang Xin, he had been vehemently opposed to this arrangement as he didn't think that a young man in his 20s would be capable of completing such an important mission. However, Zhang Xin had forcibly imposed this arrangement upon him, and he had no choice but to accept it. Even so, he was still quite averse toward Tang Wulin. From his outward appearance alone, this young man was truly impeccable. He was tall and broad with a pair of captivating eyes, and was extremely handsome. Even as picky as he was, he would be more than happy to have such a handsome young man as his son-in-law. However, his aura clearly indicated that he was only a soul sage, which was even worse than what he had projected. He had thought that for someone to become the sect master at such a young age, he had to be an extraordinary cultivation prodigy. But only after meeting Tang Wulin did he realize that Tang Wulin was even younger and possessed an even lower cultivation rank than he had imagined. He was only a soul sage. Just as he was inspecting Tang Wulin, the latter suddenly turned toward him with a smile and asked, "Oh, Master Li, what is the Dou Spirit Empire's reaction toward the looming threat of war? I'm referring to specific details. Have they taken any measures in response?" The Dou Spirit Empire was potentially going to be attacked by the most powerful continent on the entire planet soon, so they were definitely in a state of panic. However, what was important to Tang Wulin was to assess what preparatory measures they had taken, as that would tell him what kind of attitude he should adopt toward the Dou Spirit Empire in order to complete his mission. Li Yan replied, "When they first received this news, the royal family of the Dou Spirit Empire was in disbelief. After all, the entire planet had been in a peaceful state for a very long time. Let me give you a brief rundown of the overall situation in the Dou Spirit Empire. The empire currently has a population of around 26 million, which is around 10% that of the Douluo continent, and around a third of the Douluo continent's population. They have an army of 400,000 troops, including 100,000 members who are responsible for logistics and general duties. There are 10 legions, of which 2 are naval fleets, and the equipment they have access to can't even begin to compare to that of the Douluo continent's federal military. According to our estimations, the entire military on the Dou Spirit Empire only possesses around 10,000 mechas, and very few large-scale soul weapons. If a war were to commence, the Douluo continent would most likely be able to conquer this empire in a very short time with just a single carrier-based vanguard group alone. The power of the 300,000 troops in the Dou Spirit Empire's military is roughly equivalent to that of only 50,000 elite federal military soldiers from the Douluo continent. Tang Wulin asked, "Does the Dou Spirit Empire have any advantages?" Li Yan replied, "I can only think of a home continent advantage. They're more familiar with this continent than the Douluo continent's federal military, but that's hardly a significant advantage that they can bank on. Hence, according to my knowledge, their plan is to allow the federal military to enter the Dou Spirit continent, then employ guerrilla warfare tactics to stall for time before finding an opportunity to sever the federal military supply lines." Chapter 1252. There are currently 2 prominent voices in the Dou Spirit Empire, the first of which I just elaborated on. The other side advocates engaging the federal military in direct battle and letting the chips fall where they may. Of course, there's also a minority that proposes negotiating for peace. In reality, if it isn't for the fact that the Dou Spirit Empire is a monarchy, most of the empire would probably be in support of surrender. They're well aware of the disparity between them and the Douluo Federation. This is a fundamental gap that can't be bridged. Tang Wulin's brows furrowed slightly. "How is our Tang sect's relationship with the royal family?" Li Yan replied, "We are the #1 arms suppliers to the Dou Spirit Empire. Almost all their high-end weaponry technology was sold to them by our Tang sect, but in reality, we've been very conservative with the technology that we've been selling them in the past several millennia. This is to limit the rate of their technological development and to prevent them from depleting their resources too quickly. As such, our Tang sect holds a very lofty status in the Dou Spirit Empire, but the royal family is actually rather dissatisfied with us. They're harboring great hopes that you'll be bringing them sufficient weapons for them to contend with the Douluo Federation. As such, it'll be very easy to give them the weapons, but preventing this war from happening will be nowhere near as simple. Tang Wuling nodded in response. I see. Is there a city known as Spirit Wave City near Heaven Dou City? There is. Spirit Wave City is quite a small city, though. Li Yan was rather befuddled by the sudden change in direction this conversation had taken. Let's go to Spirit Wave City first, Tang Wuling instructed. Li Yan's brows furrowed slightly. Why do you want to go to Spirit Wave City? The Dou Spirit Empire's royal family has already received news of your arrival. Shouldn't you be going to see them first? Tang Wuling shook his head in response. No, we'll go to Spirit Wave City first. Li Yan's brows furrowed even more rightly upon hearing this, and he wanted to say something further, but he repressed the urge to do so in the end and turned to the driver at the front. Go to Spirit Wave City. The atmosphere had become rather awkward, and Li Yan turned to Tang Wuling with a contemplative look before asking, Sect Master, would you be able to tell me your purpose for visiting Spirit Wave City? I believe it would be inadvisable to simply ignore the royal family. Tang Wuling replied, I have something I need to do in Spirit Wave City. On top of that, I didn't know that we had to visit the royal family right after arriving here, so they can wait. Li Yan could tell from Tang Wuling's demeanor that he had already decided everything without discussing the matter with him, and that made him quite displeased. This young man's cultivation rank wasn't anything special, but he sure had a bit of a temper. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. Sometimes it's good to make people wait, wouldn't you say so, Hall Master Li? Li Yan replied in a serious manner. I think that would be very inadvisable in this current situation. If you're determined to do this and sour our relationship with the Dou Spirit Empire as a result, it will be very difficult for us to carry out the rest of our mission. Tang Wuling said, we shouldn't be the ones clambering to meet them. You just said that the Dou Spirit Empire is a monarchy, and the biggest concern for a monarchy is that the inheritance of their power gets severed. Hence, they won't surrender to the Federation no matter what, and they need us far more than the Douluo Empire does. We are in a position of power here, so why should we be in a rush to meet them? Let them wait. Li Yan remained silent in response, but cast his gaze out the window to express his displeasure toward this course of action. Tang Wuling naturally had selfish intentions behind his decision to visit Spirit Wave City first. Saving his parents was extremely high on his list of priorities, but at the same time, it really was a good idea to make the royal family wait for now. If they wanted to gain the upper hand in the negotiation, the first thing that they had to do was place themselves in an advantageous position. In the face of the Dou Spirit Empire and Douluo Empire, the last thing the Tang sect wanted to do was to appear overly eager, as that would completely ruin the basis for negotiation. Thus, silence returned to the vehicle, and Tang Wuling closed his eyes to rest. For some reason, ever since he arrived in the Dou Spirit Empire, he had been struck by an indistinct feeling that there was something familiar and intimate nearby. Was this the feeling of being in close proximity to his parents? Spirit Wave City was less than 100 kilometers away from the capital of the Dou Spirit Empire, Heaven Dou City, and they arrived at their destination after about 4 hours. From a distance, it could be seen that Spirit Wave City was quite a simple city that was rather antiquated in design. The style of the buildings was similar to that of Heaven Dou City on the Douluo continent, and they had clearly drawn inspiration from the same sources. What was quite intriguing to Tang Wuling was that Spirit Wave City had city walls. In the Douluo Federation, city walls were almost relics of the past that could only be seen in ancient tomes. Who would have thought they would still be in use in the Dou Spirit Empire? This was a clear indication that the Dou Spirit Empire was still very much fond of the traditions of the Douluo continent, and many of the buildings here were of the same style as buildings on the Douluo continent in ancient times. Spirit Wave City was a small city without any particularly tall buildings, and most of the structures were less than 6 stories tall. The streets were very clean and sparsely frequented, striking Tang Wuling with the feeling that he had returned to the distant past on the Douluo continent. What a beautiful little city. How could he allow a city like this to be ravaged by war? Father, Mother, are you here? Tang Wuling turned to Li Yan, whom he had barely spoken to at all during this trip, and asked, Hall Master Li, would you be able to organize lodging for us near the Spirit Pagoda? I have some matters that I need to take care of. You want to stay near the Spirit Pagoda? Li Yan's brows furrowed upon hearing this. He was already very displeased with Tang Wuling's decision to visit Spirit Wave City first. After all, he had already arranged a meeting with the royal family of the Dou Spirit Empire, and now that Tang Wuling was asking to stay near the Spirit Pagoda, he finally couldn't hold back any longer. Sect Master, I'm sure you're aware of our delicate relationship with the Spirit Pagoda. Is this really appropriate? His expression had darkened significantly as he spoke. Tang Wuling replied, we'll be sure to disguise ourselves properly. I'll leave it to you, Hall Master Li. Li Yan was silent for a moment before nodding in response. As the supervisor for the Dou Spirit Empire branches of the Tang sect, he had the courtesy and self-restraint to not argue any further with Tang Wuling. However, Li Yan's self-restraint wasn't shared by all of his subordinates, and one of the men accompanying him immediately flared up with rage. Sect Master, are you aware that the Spirit Pagoda is most likely partially responsible for the Shrek City bombing? The Spirit Pagoda is our enemy. Tang Wuling turned to the man and replied, of course I'm aware of that. The middle-aged man continued, and yet you still insist on staying near the Spirit Pagoda. The Spirit Pagoda is very powerful, and Spirit Wave City is the center of their sphere of influence on this continent. Are you aware of how heavily our plan would be impacted if your covers are blown by them? Shrek Academy was destroyed, as was our Tang sect headquarters on the Douluo continent. Yet you're still approaching the Spirit Pagoda despite this. Are you going to cooperate with them? Even if we set aside the mission, we won't even be able to face all of those who perished alongside Shrek Academy. Oh, are you from Shrek Academy? Tang Wuling asked. That's right. I graduated from the inner court of the Shrek Academy before joining the Tang sect here on the Dou Spirit continent. The middle-aged man replied in a proud manner, displaying a lot of pride through his connection to Shrek Academy. In that case, do you know who you're speaking to? Shishi suddenly asked. The middle-aged man turned toward him. What do you mean, kid? Shishi sighed. It's a shame to see that the alumni of the academy no longer follow the academy's rules. What did you say? The middle-aged man immediately exclaimed, how dare you slander me? Shishi rose to his feet before leaning against Tang Wuling's seat as he appraised the man with an indifferent expression. How is this slander? I also come from Shrek Academy, but unlike you, I'm a member of the current Shrek 7 Monsters, and I'm also an elder of the Sea Gods Pavilion. Are you not disrespecting your superiors here? The middle-aged man was a soul Douluo, and he stared at Shishi in an incredulous manner. You're an elder of the Sea Gods Pavilion. The academy really has fallen. He didn't make this abundantly clear, but it was quite obvious what he was implying. Shishi immediately flared up with rage. What are you trying to say? These people no longer have any respect for the academy. Boss, how can we gather all of the academy alumni under our banner when even someone like him is disrespecting you? It's truly going to be an arduous task to revive the academy. Chapter 1253. Li Yan had also figured out what Shishi was implying at this point, and he asked, Sect Master, are you related to Shrek Academy as well? Shishi explained, the man you're looking at is not just the Tang Sect Master, but also the leader of the current Shrek 7 Monsters, and the Sea Gods Pavilion Master. He's not just a representative for the Tang Sect, but also for Shrek Academy. The academy may have been destroyed, but I'm sure that all 3 continents have to acknowledge our status. Li Yan was quite stunned to hear this, and he couldn't help but see Tang Wuling through new eyes. The Sea Gods Pavilion Master was someone who ranked alongside the Tang Sect's Douluo Palace Master, and the last Sea Gods Pavilion Master, Atlas Douluo Yangming, was widely regarded as the most powerful being on the entire continent. Just how impressive was this young man to have obtained the approval of both Yangming and the Tang Sect? Yan, do you still recognize me? All of a sudden, a person sitting in the back wearing a baggy hooded cloak suddenly drew back the hood, revealing a set of exquisitely beautiful facial features and a head of white hair. All of the people from the Tang Sect's Dou Spirit Empire branches were momentarily stunned at the sight of her. She was simply too beautiful, and the color of her hair was very striking as well. Li Yan's expression stiffened upon seeing her, following which an incredulous look appeared in his eyes, and his voice began to tremble as he said, You're the Holy Spirit Douluo. That's right. A faint smile appeared on Li's face as she replied. She is telling the truth. Wuling is not just the Tang Sect Master, he's also our Sea Gods Pavilion Master. I can vouch for him. Li Yan suddenly rose to his feet in a slightly frantic manner before hurriedly making his way over to Yali, then falling to one knee. Li Yan pays his respects to Her Majesty. Everyone present was stunned to see this, especially those from the Tang Sect branches. Here in the Dou Spirit Empire, even the royal family treated him as an esteemed guest. Yet now, he was kneeling down in front of this exquisite beauty. This was something that he wouldn't even do in the face of the king of the Dou Spirit Empire. He was a hyper Douluo who represented the Tang Sect and held an extremely lofty status. Surely it was an overreaction for him to be kneeling down to this woman. A slightly resigned look appeared on Yali's face. What are you doing? Please get up. Li Yan refused to get up, and his voice began to choke up as he said, "It's been 30 years since I last saw you. Your Majesty, you saved my life. Without your kindness, I wouldn't even be alive today. So please allow me to pay my respects to you. Not only did you save me, you saved my entire family. I owe you everything, and even to this day, we have a plaque of you set up in our home. Your Majesty, your hair." A wry smile appeared on Yeli's face. It became like this after Yunming passed away. "Please get up. Everyone's watching." She waved her hand through the air, and a burst of gentle force helped him up to his feet. Li Yan stood before her in a respectful manner, and said, "I didn't know you were coming, Your Majesty. My actions are inexcusable." Yali said with a faint smile, "I can tell that you're prouder than you were in the past. The leader of this group is Wu Lin, not me. So just do everything that he says. He's the joint successor selected by Yunming, the heartless Douluo, the amorous Douluo, and myself. We all believe that he's the future of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, so please lend him all of your assistance." Li Yan's face paled slightly upon hearing this, and sweat began to bead up on his forehead as he hurried back to Tang Wu Lin before extending a respectful bow. "Sect Master." A faint smile appeared on Tang Wu Lin's face, and he stood up before laying a hand on Li Yan's shoulder to prevent him from sinking into a deep bow. "We're a family, Hall Master Li. Rest assured, I'll prioritize our Tang sect and Shrek Academy's interests above all else at all times. Thank you for your hard work here in the Dou Spirit Empire. I won't try to convince you to support me with my words. After all, actions speak much louder than words. Isn't that right?" Li Yan looked deep into Tang Wu Lin's eyes and said, "Rest assured, Sect Master, I'll find a place in Spirit Wave City for everyone to stay right away." This young man who was nothing more than a soul sage truly was full of surprises. Just how exceptional did he have to be to have received acknowledgement from so many top-tier powerful beings? Li Yan still didn't know much about Tang Wu Lin, but he definitely didn't dare to disobey Holy Spirit Douluo Yali. She was one of the most important people in his life. Over 30 years ago, his entire family had been struck by disaster. Yali happened to be passing through at the time, and she saved his entire family, and even cured his son of his disability. He could still clearly recall the scenes leading up to the Holy Spirit Douluo's arrival. Her descent was accompanied by heavenly symphonies, and in his eyes, she was like a godly being. Even now, after he had become a powerful hyper Douluo, that first impression had never changed. He had been greatly shaken by the sight of Yali's white hair. She had brushed it off in a casual manner, but he could imagine just how much emotional trauma and torment she would have had to endure. All he wanted to do now was to do everything he could for her. If she wanted him to obey Tang Wu Lin, then that was what he would do. At the same time, he wanted to see for himself just what was so special about this young sect master. Rooms were organized for everyone in an antiquated hotel in Spirit Wave City. Due to the fact that this was the center of the Spirit Pagoda's sphere of influence, Li Yan had taken cautionary measures and split everyone up into groups of 3 to 5, and they all checked into the hotel at different times. Li Yan had also adopted a simple disguise. He was quite a renowned figure in the Dou Spirit Empire, so if he were to be spotted here, the Spirit Pagoda would definitely be made aware of his arrival. "Do you have any other instructions, Sect Master?" Li Yan asked in a respectful manner after accompanying Tang Wu Lin to his room. His respectful mannerisms were genuine now, in contrast with the front he had put on out of necessity. Tang Wu Lin turned to Li Yan and asked, "Hall Master Li, are you familiar with Spirit Wave City?" Li Yan replied, "I'm relatively familiar with this city. What would you like to know?" Tang Wu Lin explained, "I actually came to Spirit Wave City for 2 people. Please wait for a moment. I'll detect whether they're here or not, and if they are, I may need you to provide me with specific instructions to get to where they are." Tang Wu Lin sat down with his legs crossed on the couch as he spoke, and he closed his eyes before slowly releasing his spiritual power. He was naturally extremely familiar with the auras of his parents, and at the spirit domain realm, his spiritual power was able to cover an extremely large area. As such, it was naturally the best course of action to search for his parents using his spiritual power. Li Yan stood beside Tang Wu Lin, and he was immediately astonished by the spiritual fluctuations being released by him. Was this spirit domain realm spiritual power? As a hyper Douluo, he naturally possessed exceptional spiritual power as well, and that made him even more aware of just how important spiritual power was to soul masters of higher calibers. Hence, he had always been cultivating his spiritual power arduously in the hope of being able to ascend to a higher level in the future. As such, he was more than aware of what spirit domain realm spiritual power entailed. This was a prerequisite for one to reach the limit Douluo level, and it was synonymous to the most powerful beings in this world. Never did he think that this 7-ring sect master would have developed such an incredible level of spiritual power already. What was even more astonishing to him was that after Tang Wu Lin released his own spiritual power, it felt as if he had fused as one with the entire world around him. It was as if he were a part of this room, or a constituent component of the air around him. Even with his immense powers, he wouldn't be able to sense Tang Wu Lin's presence if he were to close his eyes. Chapter 1254. This was downright terrifying. He had only ever experienced this feeling before in the presence of the heartless Douluo and the amorous Douluo, and it felt to him that Tang Wu Lin had fused even more completely into the surrounding area than those 2 limit Douluos could. This entailed that he had a deeper understanding of the secrets and order of this world. How could a young man in his 20s possibly have developed such an in-depth understanding of the entire plane? Of course, Tang Wu Lin hadn't actually achieved this, and nor did he need to work toward this goal. He had been blessed by the ruler of the plane, so he was naturally able to reach this level without having to make any effort, and that was his biggest advantage. Li Yan took a deep breath and began to stand guard beside Tang Wu Lin. He didn't know what Tang Wu Lin was searching for, but he firmly believed that with his level of spiritual power, there was no way that he was just an ordinary soul sage. It was no wonder that he was able to become the current sect master. It was downright preposterous to consider that someone could reach the spirit domain realm in their 20s. At the very least, he had never heard of anyone like this. He was even more stunned by Tang Wu Lin's spiritual power than when he had learned that Tang Wu Lin was both the Tang sect master and Sea God's pavilion master. After all, in the world of soul masters, power reigns supreme. Tang Wu Lin's spiritual power quickly encompassed the entire hotel before spreading into the distance, scouring through the entire surrounding area and searching for those familiar auras. He was confident that with the bloodline connection he shared with his parents, he would be able to find them, even though they had been apart for over 10 years. This hotel was already very close to where the Spirit Pagoda was situated, so he would definitely be able to sense the presence of his parents as long as they were in this branch of the Spirit Pagoda. Time passed by slowly, and Tang Wu Lin's spiritual power finally reached its limit after encompassing an area with a diameter over 10 kilometers. This was the extent of his sensory range, and keeping this up was extremely taxing for both his brain and mind, so he wouldn't be able to keep this up for long. However, he still hadn't detected his parents' auras, nor could he sense any bloodline connections. How could this be? Could it be that teacher Mang Tian had been mistaken? When he opened his eyes again, his gaze was tinged with a hint of exhaustion and resignation. If they weren't in Spirit Wave City, then searching for his parents on this continent would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. On top of that, he couldn't contact Mang Tian here, so he wouldn't be able to secure any further useful information. Prior to coming here, Tang Wu Lin had already confirmed the information he had with Mang Tian on multiple occasions, but all of his efforts seemed to have gone in vain, and that was rather disheartening to him. Did you fail to find them? Li Yan could tell from Tang Wu Lin's expression that his search hadn't yielded the desired results. Tang Wu Lin nodded before asking, "Hall Master Li, do you know if the Spirit Pagoda has any secret research centers in the Spirit Wave City?" "Secret research centers? Like for weapons?" Li Yan asked. Tang Wu Lin replied, "I'm not sure, but it should be for weaponry research." Li Yan nodded without any hesitation in response. "I know that there's definitely a secret research center in Spirit Wave City. In reality, our Tang sect has also been constantly searching for this research center, so we can plant some spies and see just what the Spirit Pagoda is up to. Aside from our Tang sect, the Spirit Pagoda is the organization that purchases the most resources from the Dou Spirit Empire. Due to the fact that they're the developers of soul spirits, their status is not inferior to that of our Tang sect in the Dou Spirit Empire, and they're even more influential than us in the world of soul masters. Where is their secret research center situated? Do we have any leads?" Tang Wu Lin asked. Just because he was unable to find something with his spiritual power didn't mean that it didn't exist. It was quite likely that there were some secretive places that could keep out spiritual power detection. Li Yan replied, "We can basically confirm that this secret research center is situated in Spirit Wave City, but we don't know exactly where it is. The Spirit Pagoda has kept the research center hidden very well, but according to the information that we've gathered, we think that it's most likely situated within the Spirit Pagoda or underground beneath the Spirit Pagoda branch. Those would be the safest places." Tang Wu Lin was enlightened to hear this. If it's situated underground, then it's only natural that my spiritual power would fail to detect it. "Hall Master Li, there's something I should tell you. I'm actually searching for my parents. When I was only 10 years old, they were abducted by some people and taken to the Dou Spirit continent to conduct some kind of research. They can only occasionally contact the Douluo continent, and I was only made aware recently that they're most likely being controlled by the Spirit Pagoda. pagoda. Hence, I have to save them before we begin negotiations with the royal family here. This is technically a private matter, so I won't ask the Tang sect and the academy to help me here. I'll only bring along a few of my friends to conduct the search, but I hope you can assist me by providing the relevant information that I need to know. He revealed his objective to Li Yan as he knew that if he wanted to find his parents in this completely unfamiliar place, he would definitely require Li Yan's assistance. Li Yan faltered slightly upon hearing this before immediately nodding in response. That's very understandable. I didn't think that there was such a motive behind your decision. Rest assured, sect master, I'll think of a way for you. We've actually been constantly trying to search for and infiltrate this research center as well, and according to the information we've gathered, this research center is most likely developing a special type of weapon. It should be related to a soul masters, but we don't know exactly what it is. However, the fact that the Spirit Pagoda is pouring so much effort and resources into its development clearly indicates that it's not going to be some ordinary weapon. I'll contact the people from the Tang sect branch here right away. If I receive any useful information, I'll relay it to you right away. I'll leave it to you. Then, Tang Wuling heaved an internal sigh of relief. This was a private matter, so Li Yan was most likely only willing to help him due to his connection with the Holy Spirit Douluo. Li Yan did things very efficiently, and he returned to Tang Wuling's room that same night. We have a spy planted in the Spirit Pagoda. You can disguise yourself to look like him and infiltrate their branch. He can confirm that there is indeed a secret research center beneath the Spirit Pagoda branch, but he's not authorized to enter it, so he doesn't know what kind of place it is. However, it's quite possible that this is the secret research center that you're searching for. Tang Wuling's eyes immediately lit up. That's fantastic news. Li Yan continued. He drew up a map that will show you the general scope of where the entrance is. You can infiltrate the Spirit Pagoda by borrowing his identity to search for that place, but there's going to be some risk involved. Tang Wuling nodded in response. How powerful is this Spirit Pagoda branch? Li Yan replied, very powerful. Heaven Dou City is the center of our sphere of influence, so overall, we're more powerful than the Spirit Pagoda there, but the Spirit Pagoda is more secretive, so we can't accurately gauge just how much power they have up their sleeve. What we do know is that this branch is essentially the Spirit Pagoda headquarters on the Dou Spirit Empire, and there are at least 5 titled Douluo situated in there, of which at least 2 are hyper Douluos. On top of that, it's also guarded by a large number of other powerful soul masters, and the internal defense systems are also quite highly developed. As such, if your cover gets blown, you could get trapped and surrounded very quickly. Tang Wuling nodded in response. I understand. We'll make a detailed plan so we can infiltrate the Spirit Pagoda headquarters while minimizing the chances of being discovered. Please give me the information regarding this spy that we planted, and I'll begin emulating his mannerisms. All right, on the top floor of the Spirit Pagoda's Spirit Wave C branch, the entire top floor was a single spacious hall, and the center of which a large round table was situated. Around the table sat all of the higher-ups of the Spirit Pagoda, the Dou Spirit continent. The person sitting at the head of the table was a handsome elderly man who appeared to be in his 60s, and he gave off quite an intimidating presence even just sitting still in his chair. Aside from him, there were 6 more people, and these 7 were collectively known as the 7 most powerful Spirit Pagoda members of the Dou Spirit Empire. Branch chairman, who are these important figures being sent here by the headquarters? Are they sending people to supervise us, or are they here to oversee the imminent war? At the very least, it has to seem like we're adopting a neutral stance on the surface. We can't make our allegiances clear to the general public. Otherwise, if the Federation is unable to conquer the Dou Spirit Empire, we'll be in some trouble, a middle-aged man said. Chapter 1255. The branch chairman replied in an indifferent voice. Do you think the Dou Spirit Empire can withstand an invasion from the federal fleets? Of course they wouldn't be able to. They would still be significantly lacking in power even if they were to somehow recruit the assistance of the Douluo Empire. However, I'm worried about our old enemy. The Tang sect headquarters may have been bombed, but they've only become more aggressive here in the Dou Spirit Empire, and the royal family is oppressing us very heavily. They're even turning the royal family against us by telling them that we're partially responsible for instigating this war. If they step in to assist the Dou Spirit Empire, things will become a lot more complicated. We all know that no one can compare with the Tang sect when it comes to the ability to create soul missiles. If it wasn't for the fact that some of the special metals have been under the control of the Federation this entire time, the Tang sect would have most likely developed soul missiles in excess of the 9th grade long ago. No one knows exactly how powerful the Tang sect is. The branch chairman's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. You're saying that the Tang sect could support the Dou Spirit Empire? That's right. There are no clear signs to suggest that this could happen at the moment, but according to the information we've gathered over the past few months, the people of the Tang sect have clearly grown a lot closer with the royal family of the Dou Spirit Empire, and it would be far too naive of us to think that the Tang sect would be unaware that a war is most likely imminent. This isn't the Douluo Federation. The Tang sect is more powerful and influential than us here, so we have to be wary of them. The branch chairman nodded in response. This is indeed an issue. When are those people leaving? If they haven't left yet, we might need their help. We won't be able to resist the Tang sect on our own. The research is finally close to fruition, and those people will leave as soon as they get their hands on the results. All of the researchers will be taken care of so they won't be able to leak any information. We're finally close to getting results after so many years of research and development. Hopefully, they'll be able to make good use of this. In all honesty, I don't think this is a good thing. The chairman thinks that he can control everything, but those people are downright deranged. All right, let's not discuss this here. Tell everyone over at Heaven Dou City to focus and keep their eyes peeled for anything abnormal. In particular, if there are any unfamiliar people visiting the royal palace, make sure it gets reported to us right away. I'll also be keeping the chairman updated on the situation here, and the Federation will most likely make a move in half a year at most. Yes, after entering the Spirit Pagoda, Tang Wuling's gaze remained focused up ahead. With his spiritual power, he could clearly sense everything around him even without having to look around. During the past 2 days of practice, he had basically mastered all of the mannerisms of his adopted identity. He was a mid-level official in the Spirit Pagoda and was mainly responsible for some areas of logistics such as purchasing and distributing resources. It was not an extremely important role, but it brought him into contact with many people in the branch as everyone had to come to him for resources. His name was Ni Chen, and he possessed a second-rate dragon martial soul. On top of that, he had a slightly portly figure, so he was jokingly referred to as Little Fat Dragon by his colleagues in the Spirit Pagoda. He always wore a harmless-looking smile on his face, and having cultivated the body sex congenital secret method, Tang Wuling was able to alter his body to resemble Ni Chen's appearance with ease. On top of that, he had also disguised his cultivation rank very well, and he occasionally greeted the people that he passed by as he walked along. Ni Chen was very good at taking care of interpersonal relations, so he was on friendly terms with everyone. According to the information and map that he provided, Tang Wuling could ascertain that there was a special place underground here, but he wasn't sure whether it was a research center. At the very least, this was an important lead. As for his own safety, Tang Wuling wasn't all that concerned. With his current level of powers, he would at least be able to escape unless he was to encounter a limit Douluo, and there were no limit Douluos in the entire Dou Spirit Empire, which was why it was the weakest of the 3 continents. In fact, in terms of overall power, it couldn't even compare to half of the Douluo Empire. After strolling around in the Spirit Pagoda for a while, Tang Wuling returned to his office and began to take care of some daily duties, as instructed by Ni Chen. The sound of door knocking suddenly rang out, and Tang Wuling smiled as he said, "Come in." The door was opened, and a woman who appeared to be around 27 to 28 years of age strode into the room. She had above average looks, and her figure was quite exceptional. There was a smile on her face as she said, "Little Fat Dragon, can you get some things for me?" Tang Wuling quickly scoured through the information Ni Chen had given to him, and he was instantly able to identify this woman as another official of the Spirit Pagoda. She was responsible for the matters in the Spirit Ascension plane, and her position was slightly loftier than that of Ni Chen's. She was a very promiscuous woman and would often go around the Spirit Pagoda in a flirtatious manner. It was said that she had an intimate relationship with one of the higher-ups here, and her husband was in another branch. Her name was Jia Feifei. Tang Wuling rose to his feet and intentionally put on a suggestive expression as he asked, "What do you want this time, Feifei?" Jia Feifei replied, "Same as always. We expend a lot more uniforms on my end, so get me 10 more sets of uniforms." A troubled look appeared on Tang Wuling's face. That's going to be rather difficult. As you know, the uniforms are all numbered, and you already took 5 last time. If I give you 10 more, the higher-ups won't take kindly to me if they find out. Jia Feifei sidled up closer to him before gently pinching his portly waist and aiming a flirtatious look at him. "Don't give me that. Everyone knows you're in charge of resources here. Hurry up and get it done." A resigned look appeared on Tang Wuling's face. "I really can't, Feifei. I would love to help you, but..." Jia Feifei harumphed coldly as she placed her hands on her hips. "So you're gonna play hard to get, are you? Let me tell you this, the vice chairman is also aware of this. Hurry up and get The uniforms for me. Otherwise, the vice chairman will come to see you in my stead, and he won't be anywhere near as easygoing. Tang Weilin was well aware of why Zhao Feifei wanted uniforms. The management in the Spirit Pagoda was very strict, and all uniforms were numbered. A uniform was the equivalent to identification documents in the Spirit Pagoda, and she was hoarding these uniforms so she could sell them to outsiders wishing to enter the Spirit Pagoda. This was not the first time that Zhao Feifei had done something like this, but she was asking for more uniforms than usual on this occasion. Of course, none of this had anything to do with Tang Weilin. It was just that handing over the uniforms without offering any objections would be far too uncharacteristic for Ni Chen. All right. Feifei, if something happens, please put in a good word for me with the vice chairman. Tang Weilin sighed in a resigned manner. The cold look on Zhao Feifei's face immediately gave way to an elated smile. All right, let's go. The vice chairman really did instruct me to get the uniforms this time. Otherwise, why would I be asking for so many at once? They're going to be given to some guests, so no one will accuse you of anything. She latched onto Tang Weilin's arm and rubbed it against her own body as she spoke. Tang Weilin resisted the urge to retract his arm in disgust and nodded in response. Do you want them right now? Of course. Let's go. Zhao Feifei dragged him out of the room as she spoke. Tang Weilin was dragged by her to the resource storage unit in a resigned manner and brought out 10 uniforms for her. Feifei, who are these guests that you were talking about? Tang Weilin asked. A hint of fear flashed through Zhao Feifei's eyes. I don't know. However, she was clearly lying, and her expression also made Tang Weilin quite perplexed. Who could strike so much fear into the heart of a Spirit Pagoda official like her? Do you need me to accompany you? Tang Weilin asked. Zhao Feifei immediately replied, of course. Are you going to make me deliver all of these uniforms by myself? You can come with me to lend me carriage as well. It was quite apparent that these were no ordinary guests, and Tang Weilin followed Zhao Feifei to the main elevator of the Spirit Pagoda branch. After entering the elevator, Zhao Feifei pressed the button for the third underground level, and Tang Weilin was ecstatic to see this as this was his target. Ni Chen had once been to the third underground floor, and the security there was very tight. He could only roughly deduce that this level was at least 30 meters below the ground, and the defense system there was at the highest level in the entire Spirit Pagoda. Even if a high-grade soulmaster were to infiltrate that level, they would be in grave danger if their cover were to be blown. He didn't think that he would have such splendid luck as soon as he infiltrated the Spirit Pagoda. Soon, the elevator arrived, and the doors opened. Tang Weilin emerged from the elevator and immediately released his spiritual power. Now that he was underground, it should be much easier for him to detect his parents using his spiritual power. Chapter 1256. The third underground level was a world of metal. The ceiling, the walls, and the ground were all covered in thick layers of metal, and they contained clear energy fluctuations. It was no wonder that his spiritual power was unable to seep into this place. The defenses here were simply far too tight. There were 10 armed Spirit Pagoda members standing in front of a thick and heavy metal gate up ahead. We've got the uniforms. This is a handwritten order from the vice chairman. Zhao Feifei strode over to the guards before handing them the order. After Tang Weilin and Zhao Feifei's identities were verified, the metal door was slowly opened. Tang Weilin discovered that this metal door was over a meter thick. This was most likely the place. He held the uniforms and released his spiritual power beyond the door. Zhao Feifei walked on ahead, making an extra effort to flaunt her thin waist and voluptuous backside, and all of the guards stared at her with desire in their eyes, thereby naturally ignoring Tang Weilin. Unbeknownst to them, after the metal door was opened, Tang Weilin's spiritual power had quickly seeped into this metallic world to search for his parents. Soon, he came to sense just how perilous this place was. After one's spiritual power reached a certain level, one became able to sense danger, which meant that the defense system here could pose a threat to him. There weren't many people in here, and this level was much the same as the first floor of the Spirit Pagoda. Tang Weilin quickly felt a familiar aura within his sensory scope, and his heart immediately jolted in response. His heart rate began to accelerate, and his hands reflexively tightened around the uniforms he was holding. Following the passage of over 10 years, he was unable to completely ascertain whether the aura was the one that he was searching for, but it was very familiar to him. However, what was rather strange to him was that he felt no bloodline connection, which was why he wasn't able to immediately verify things. Zhao Feifei strode over to a metal door before pressing a button, and a man dressed completely in black soon emerged. The man wore a mask that covered his entire face with holes only for his eyes, mouth, and nose, and Tang Weilin was given a massive shock at the sight of this man. He didn't know this person, but his aura was far too familiar to him. It was filled with evil and coldness, as if the entire world had no bearing on him. He had a pair of dark purple eyes that resembled balls of purple flames, and he raised a pair of hands that were completely pale and devoid of blood. This was an evil soul master. The Tang sect and Shrek Academy had always speculated that the Spirit Pagoda could be connected to the Holy Spirit cult, but how could Tang Weilin not be stunned to encounter an evil soul master in such a secretive place in this Spirit Pagoda branch? He had stumbled upon this astonishing secret even before he had discovered the whereabouts of his parents. It was now beyond a doubt that the Spirit Pagoda was colluding with the Holy Spirit cult. Greetings, I'm here to bring you the uniforms you requested, Zhao Feifei said in a rather timid manner. Hand them over. The man in black had a coarse and raspy voice, and he accepted the uniforms from Tang Weilin before closing the metal door. The door slowly began to close, and it was quite clear that he had no intention of allowing Tang Weilin and Zhao Feifei to come inside. Zhao Feifei heaved an internal sigh of relief and immediately turned to leave, almost as if she were fleeing the scene. She was always struck by an indescribable sense of fear whenever she saw these people. Ugh. Right at this moment, an agonized cry suddenly rang out from beyond the doorway. All of a sudden, Tang Weilin sprang into action, raising a hand to catch the metal door with unerring accuracy. The metal door was being closed mechanically, so it was moving with enormous force, but in the face of his hand, it instantly drew to a complete halt. The man in black was walking away, and he turned toward the door again in a confused manner. He was then greeted by the sight of the thick and heavy metal door being completely torn open. Tang Weilin didn't hesitate in the slightest as he abruptly stomped his right foot onto the ground, and violent shockwaves instantly erupted forth alongside a thunderous dragon's roar, propelling the evil soul master up into the air. One golden dragon after another then rose up to catch him before crashing into his body like a series of bombs. This evil soul master was at least a soul king, but he was instantly reduced to countless scraps of flesh and blood. Golden light flashed behind him, and Tang Weilin immediately spread open his golden dragon king wings before hurtling directly toward the direction that the agonized cry had come from. If he couldn't be sure whether the aura he had detected was the correct one, that agonized cry was enough to erase all of his doubts. That was clearly his father's voice. Even though more than 10 years had passed since their abduction, Tang Weilin would never forget the voices of his parents. His father had taught him how to live his life at a very young age, and he could never forget how his father had told him that the only person in the world one could absolutely trust and rely on was oneself. At the time, his father had told him that only by making himself more powerful would he be attaining true power. His teachings had influenced Tang Weilin throughout his entire life, and these words had always stayed with him. His father's cry just now had been so urgent and filled with pain and fury. How could he continue to turn a blind eye? Beyond the metal door was a spacious area, beyond which were a series of rooms. Tang Weilin was guided solely by sound toward a certain room, and his body plowed straight through the metal door of the room as if he were a humanoid weapon. His golden dragon claws protruded out of his hands, and he tore through the metal before charging into the room, upon which he was immediately greeted by a sight that set his blood boiling. There were 7 or 8 people in the room wearing the same attire as the evil soul master he had just killed. Aside from them, there were also a few people on the ground, laying in a large puddle of blood. The man in black at the forefront of the group had his right arm raised, and his right hand had already transformed into what appeared to be the front leg of a giant praying mantis. It had lacerated a body and was hoisting it up into the air. The person that had been stabbed was none other than Tang Weilin's missing father. Tang Weilin's eyes turned completely bloodshot in an instant upon seeing this. He had already sensed that there was at least one titled Douluo present, but he didn't have the spare capacity to think about that right now. He flapped his wings with all his might, and his body shot forth like a cannonball toward the man who had stabbed his father, and he immediately unleashed his golden dragon annihilation claws with his right golden dragon claw. Massive golden claw projections encompassed most of the men in black present. He had appeared far too abruptly, from the instant that the dragon's roar rang out to the moment that Tang Weilin burst through the door. Only around a second had passed. On top of that, he had attacked without any hesitation as soon as he barged into the room, and the evil soul masters were caught completely off guard. Boom. Three of the men in black were instantly torn into smithereens by the claw projections, including the one who had stabbed Tang Wulin's father. Tang Wulin immediately caught his father before quickly injecting his soul power into his body to seal off all of the blood vessels around the laceration wound. Tang Xiran's body was spasming violently from excruciating pain, and he suddenly fell completely still in a stunned manner as he stared at Tang Wulin. Who was this chubby stranger? A blue silver emperor vine erupted from Tang Wulin's body before winding itself around Tang Xiran, strapping him to Tang Wulin's back. At the same time, his golden dragon spear appeared in his right hand before being thrust backward. Fury of the masses. Countless spear projections erupted forth, each of which was shimmering with bluish golden light, encompassing all of the remaining men in black. Chapter 1257. The man in black who was sitting in a chair at the very rear of the group immediately stood up with a stunned and infuriated expression, and he waved his right hand through the air, upon which a green halo instantly appeared beneath Tang Wulin's feet. Dense green toxic mist instantly surged upward, causing Tang Wulin's movements to noticeably decelerate, and even his fury of the masses had been weakened to a certain extent. One of the men in black standing near the front of the ground released his soul rings, of which there were a total of 7, consisting of 2 yellows, 4 purples, and 1 black. At the same time, a pair of huge inky black axes appeared in his hands before being swept toward Tang Wulin like lightning. Meanwhile, one of the other men in black had summoned a crimson longbow and shot an arrow at Tang Wulin from close range, while another man in black pulled out a soul tool that blasted a series of scattered pellets toward Tang Wulin amid a loud boom. The evil soul masters had reacted very quickly, releasing their martial souls to retaliate as soon as Tang Wulin unleashed his golden dragon annihilation claws. The red arrow hurtling toward Tang Wulin was instantly destroyed, but it continued to permeate toward him as a cloud of red toxic mist. Meanwhile, the axe-wielding evil soul master clashed directly with Tang Wulin's fury of the masses, and a string of collisions ensued. The heavy-looking axes were no match for Tang Wulin's golden dragon spear and was swept aside with ease while the spear plunged into his chest. Even though they were both soul sages, there was clearly no soul sage who could be a match for Tang Wulin. In response to the scattered pellets unleashed by the soul tool, Tang Wulin thrust his left hand forward, and a series of blue silver emperor vines intertwined with one another to form a shield that kept the attack at bay. At the same time, a massive tulip bloomed behind him. In the face of the aura being released by the giant purple flower, all of the red mist in the air and the green mist rising up from the ground instantly melted away into nothingness. The beautiful silk tulip was the monarch of all immortal plants, and the bane of all poison. Roar! A thunderous roar of fury rang out, and a giant golden dragon head appeared in front of Tang Wulin. The remaining 3 evil soul masters shuddered in response to his roar, and the one who had been seated before displayed the least reaction, but his 2 companions had completely stiffened on the spot. Tang Wulin stepped forward before sweeping his golden dragon spear horizontally through the air, and a halo proliferated outward. At the same time, blue silver emperor vines shot forth toward the 3 men in black as countless spears. The surface of every single blue silver emperor vines was covered by a layer of fine thin scales, and they were hurtling through the air with peerless might. This was his blood soul fusion skill, blue emperor dragon impaling array. The 2 evil soul masters around him were only soul emperors, and they were instantly punched full of holes and killed on the spot. Meanwhile, the evil soul master directly up ahead waved his right hand through the air, and a dark green toxic spring suddenly erupted from the ground to dispel the blue emperor dragon impaling array. He was the leader of all of these evil soul masters, and he was a rank 91 titled Douluo. His martial soul was the poison spring. However, for some reason, in the face of this enemy who clearly possessed a far inferior cultivation rank, he felt as if he were being overwhelmed. Right at this moment, he suddenly sensed that everything around him seemed to have slowed down, and the opponent before him had become slightly blurry and indistinct. For some reason, the poison spring that had gushed forth suddenly began to withdraw, and it was also in this instant that a speck of golden light abruptly reached him. The evil soul master's pupils contracted violently, and he was barely able to believe his own eyes. In the next instant, all of his energy was abruptly deprived from him by a burst of enormous invisible force before flowing into the spear that had run through his chest. Tang Wulin had reverted back to his original appearance, and his entire body was covered in golden scales, giving him the appearance of a celestial deity that had descended into the mortal world. It had only taken him less than 20 seconds to kill all of these evil soul masters, including that titled Douluo. Ever since his spiritual power had reached the spirit domain realm, his aura in battle had become overwhelmingly powerful, and this also seemed to partially be the result of the golden dragon king bloodline's influence. With his current level of power, it still wasn't that easy for him to take down a titled Douluo, especially when neither of them had donned their suits of battle armor. After all, he was still only a soul sage. However, perhaps it was due to the massive psychological shock that he had received or how extensively he had pondered millennium white clouds on the journey here. But in that instant, he was abruptly struck by a sense of enlightenment. His spiritual power took on a substantial form and warped time to a certain extent, thereby stalling the titled Douluo for a split second, which was all the time that his golden dragon spear needed to pierce through his body. That's right, his spirit domain realm spiritual power had been elevated once again, and he had attained a spiritual domain. Never did he think that he would take this all-important step at a time like this. In reality, he had already been extremely close to making this breakthrough, but if he had a choice, he would rather never attain a spiritual domain than witness what he had just seen. His father's aura had clearly already become extremely feeble, and he didn't even dare to take him away from here. After taking care of all of the enemies, Tang Wulin quickly helped his father down from his back while wiping away the disguise from his face, and tears were already flowing uncontrollably from his eyes. Father, it's me, Wulin. He poured his soul power incessantly into his father's body to maintain his vitality. Tang Xiran forced his own eyes open with great difficulty. At this point, all of the color had left his face, and Tang Wulin could sense that his life force was close to non-existent. There wasn't even much blood flowing in his veins. The evil soul master that had just stabbed him had a vampire-praying mantis martial soul, so not only did he stab through Tang Xiran's heart, he had also sucked away most of Tang Xiran's blood. If Tang Wulin had arrived on the scene any later than he did, Tang Xiran would already be dead. Only through Tang Wulin's sustained injection of soul power could he just barely cling on to life. Tang Xiran raised his hand feebly to point toward a certain direction, and a gratified smile appeared on his face. He was no longer capable of speech, but he was truly very happy. He didn't think that he would get a chance to see his son before he passed away. Following the passage of over 10 years, he had grown up from a little boy into a handsome and heroic adult. This was his son. Tang Xiran's heart was filled with elation as he witnessed Tang Wulin killing those bastards who had constantly terrorized him and his wife for the past decade. Even though his feebleness was being exacerbated by the second, his heart was filled with happiness. He had imagined killing all of these evil soul masters and destroying everything here on countless occasions, and never did he think that his son would accomplish all of this instead. What could make him happier than this? Tang Wulin turned toward the direction that Tang Xiran was pointing in, and he was greeted by the sight of a metal wall. He hurriedly picked up his father in his arms before rushing toward the wall and tearing it down. Cries of alarm rang out from the neighboring room, and there were 4 women in there, all of whom were wearing identical work uniforms. One of those women was none other than his mother. Lang let loose a cry of grief at the sight of Tang Xiran before quickly rushing toward him. She had failed to recognize her own son, but she could see that her husband was on the brink of death. Mother! Tang Wulin cried out with intense sorrow in his voice. Lang had aged. She clearly had more white hairs than in the past, and more wrinkles had also appeared on her face. Her eyes were swollen and soulless, and her body shuddered violently upon hearing Tang Wulin's voice as she turned toward him in an incredulous manner. Tang Wulin had changed far too much during the years they had been apart. He had grown from a boy into a man, but the shape of his facial features was still familiar to her, and those large clear eyes proved to her beyond a doubt that this was indeed her son. Tears immediately gushed out of Lang's eyes, following which a horrified look appeared on her face. Get out of here. Those bastards will kill you. We're getting out of here together. His final hope lay in the Holy Spirit Douluo. Only she would be capable of bringing her father back from the brink of death. Bright golden light erupted from Tang Wulin's eyes, and 6 figures separated themselves from his body. They were none other than the 6 plant system great beasts. Chapter 1258. They were Tang Wulin's most important trump cards, and he hadn't even revealed them when he was being abducted by Nanali. However, in order to rescue his parents, he had summoned these great beasts to aid him. A golden visor appeared over his face, and he handed his father over to the beautiful silk tulip. Meanwhile, the delicate inferno apricot flower and the other great beasts carried Lang and the 3 other panicked women with her out of the room. Tang Wulin's eyes were filled with unbridled fury, and his palpable killing intent was emanating from his body. He held onto his golden dragon spear and strode out of the room. He had a spiritual connection with the beautiful silk tulip, so he could constantly monitor Tang Xiran's condition while the beautiful silk tulip used its energy as an immortal plant to nourish his body. Tang Wulin charged out of the room, and at this point, blaring sirens had already rung out across the entire level. As soon as Tang Wulin emerged, he was greeted by a series of soul lasers, and it was at this moment that he displayed his prowess on the battlefield. He activated his golden dragon tyrant body body and stomped his right foot onto the ground without taking any evasive measures. A series of golden dragons rose up before revolving around him, keeping all of the oncoming attacks at bay. Meanwhile, blue silver emperor vines intertwined to form a protective barrier that shielded everyone behind him. At the same time, countless spear projections erupted from his golden dragon spear, and all of the weapons that had appeared from the ceiling and the walls were destroyed. In the distance, one guard after another appeared, and all of them began to attack Tang Wulin from afar with their soul weapons. Tang Wulin's third golden soul ring lit up, and a golden dragon roar erupted alongside his dragon's might. Amid the thunderous roar of fury, large swathes of spirit pagoda soul masters were felled like wheat in a harvest. After attaining a spiritual domain, Tang Wulin's spiritual power had improved even further, and there was no way that these low and mid-grade soul masters would be able to withstand his golden dragon roar. After all, this was only the Dou Spirit Empire and not the Douluo Federation. They charged headfirst into the elevator, and at this point, it had already been disabled, thereby making it inaccessible. Tang Wulin put away his golden dragon spear before tearing through the wall with his golden dragon claws, forcibly plowing open a passageway through the earth. Yellow light emanated from his mountain dragon king torso bone, and the earth parted for him as they rapidly ascended in a diagonally upward direction. His heart was burning up with urgency, and he had no time for subtlety. Nothing was more important now than his father's life. The sooner they could reach the Holy Spirit Douluo, the greater the chances of his father's survival. The entire Spirit Pagoda had already been plunged into complete turmoil. The elevators had been disabled to prevent enemies from rising up from underground, but when the higher-ups of the Spirit Pagoda piled into the elevator to descend to the underground levels, they discovered that it had already been destroyed. Prior to tearing through the earth, Tang Wulin had destroyed the elevator's soul power operated system with his golden dragon claws. If he couldn't go up, then they wouldn't be able to come down either. Brother Luo, once we get out of here, take my parents to find the Holy Spirit Douluo. I'll take care of everything here. After tearing through the metal walls, the earth was no longer able to pose any hindrance to his spiritual detection. Earth elements were also a part of his world, and with Tang Wulin's affinity with this entire plane, it was naturally a simple task for him to transmit his spiritual power through these earth elements. He didn't even dare to turn around to look at his father right now as doing so could make him completely lose control. He was constantly telling himself to be calm, and the best course of action he could take now was to hold back everyone from the Spirit Pagoda while the plant system great beasts took his parents away. But Wulin, you'll be on your own. All right. The beautiful silk tulip accepted this arrangement in the end, following which a set of golden dragons emerged from the ground amid a violent thump. Tang Wulin used his soul power to part the earth, and the six plant system great beast immediately rushed out before rapidly traveling toward the direction that Tang Wulin had pointed out for them using his spiritual power. As for Tang Wulin himself, he had no intention of leaving this place. His friends had already received a notification from him that he was going to destroy this place. He had initially still harbored a shred of hope toward the Spirit Pagoda. After all, this was an organization founded by the legendary Spirit Ice Douluo who Yuao. The last time the Holy Spirit cult threatened to lay waste to the continent, the Spirit Ice Douluo had spearheaded the effort to bring them down. Never did he think that the Spirit Pagoda would actually collude with the Holy Spirit cult, and on top of that, it was yet to be seen whether his father would survive this ordeal. He had never been so furious in his entire life, and on top of that, he was absolutely convinced that the Spirit Pagoda had to be almost directly responsible for the Shrek Academy bombing. The entire Spirit Pagoda was in a state of turmoil, and all of the detection devices had been activated, so they naturally immediately detected Tang Wulin, who had just emerged from underground. To the higher-ups of this Spirit Pagoda branch, the sirens blaring from underground were like alarming thunderclaps. It wouldn't be too severe an issue if their research were to be leaked, but the most important thing was that they had evil soul masters from the Holy Spirit cult down there. If those evil soul masters were to be exposed, the Spirit Pagoda would be severely impacted. Several figures descended from the top floor of the Spirit Pagoda like massive birds, and blaring sirens had rung out across almost the entire city. Hordes of Spirit Pagoda soul masters were pouring out of the building, and several dozens of mechas had flown out of designated mecha openings on the building before descending onto the ground. The Spirit Pagoda branch was like a porcupine that was brandishing all of its spikes in a menacing display. It was also right at this moment that a series of figures rushed toward Tang Wulin from behind. These were the other 6 members of Shrek's 7 monsters, as well as Arahang and Sima Jinkai. They had been waiting here all along, and they weren't accompanied by any of the people from the Tang Sect's Dou Spirit Empire branches. In order to not affect the overall plan, Tang Wulin had requested Li Yun to keep the members of the Tang Sect from directly participating in this matter as this was a personal affair. What's the situation, boss? Shishi arrived by Tang Wulin's side first, and he was stunned by Tang Wulin's current appearance. He had never seen Tang Wulin in such a furious state, and what was even more terrifying was the violent aura emanating from his body. Tang Wulin replied in a heavy voice, I found my parents, but father is on the brink of death. There were Holy Spirit cult members in there. The Spirit Pagoda really is colluding with the Holy Spirit cult. Everyone fell silent upon hearing this. All of a sudden, Arahang's body expanded drastically, and a fearlessly powerful aura erupted forth as he roared, fuck them up. Sima Jinkai didn't say anything, but he had already arrived by Tang Wulin's side, and the massive dragon-slaying saber appeared in his grasp as his aura also swelled at an alarming rate. Shrek's 7 monsters also fanned out with Tang Wulin at the forefront in New Zealand, and Yuan and Yu on either side of him. Shishi vanished into thin air, Xu Shaoan stood behind him, with Xu Lizzie by her side, and Yue's Heng Yu brought up the rear. The 7 of them maintained a near triangular formation, and at this point, the figures descending from above had already arrived. The first to land on the ground was none other than the branch chairman of the Spirit Pagoda. Who dares to attack the Spirit Pagoda? The branch chairman was quite surprised to see Tang Wulin and the others, not because of the terrifying aura erupting from Arahang's body, but instead, due to the fact that they hadn't fled the scene. This was a clear indication that they were confident in their inability to contend with the entire Spirit Pagoda branch. Tang Wulin didn't say anything as words couldn't express the fury in his heart. His golden visor had concealed his face, but his bloodshot eyes were still visible. He abruptly stepped forward and stomped his right foot heavily onto the ground. A dragon's roar akin to a rumbling thunderclap immediately rang out, and was audible within a radius of several kilometers. A massive halo that was over 100 meters in diameter rose up from the ground to encompass everyone within it. The halo was comprised of countless intertwined golden dragons, and it was none other than his violent golden dragon domain. At the same time, Tang Wulin's body began to swell in size as pieces of battle armor emerged. This wasn't a complete set of battle armor, but he already had a helmet, visor, pauldrons, cuirass, and gauntlets. The metal used to construct these pieces of battle armor were like golden crystals inscribed with dragon scale patterns, creating a sight of streamlined beauty. On his shoulders, he had a pair of thick and heavy pauldrons that resembled the shape of dragon claws, and his pair of golden dragon king wings abruptly spread open on his back. What was even more terrifying was that in that instant, Tang Wulin's aura swelled to several times its original intensity. It was as if his blood had been set alight, and golden flames had ignited over his body. Chapter 1259. Roar. A thunderous dragon's roar abruptly rang out, and Tang Wulin's body swelled once again to 7 meters tall. The scales brought to him by his golden dragon body were far thicker and heavier than before, and layers of them stacked on top of one another. An extremely fearsome aura erupted from his body, and his golden dragon spear expanded along with his body. A layer of dragon scales had also appeared over the surface of the spear as if it had been influenced by Tang Wulin's power. A burst of piercing golden light suddenly erupted from Tang Wulin's body, and it extended forward to form a long golden path that instantly struck the branch chairman. At the same time, Tang Wulin's aura also swelled to its peak. At this moment, his heart was filled solely with violence and slaughter. The yearning he had felt for his parents for so many years had already been transformed into the purest hatred. It was as if his golden dragon king bloodline had truly been set alight, and he was completely plunged into a state of mindless violence. The effect of the violent golden dragon domain seemed to have become several dozen-fold more potent, and this wasn't all that prominent to everyone else, but Tang Wulin was benefiting immensely from it. Boom. The branch chairman's entire body was instantly illuminated into a golden color, but at the same time, he unleashed a layer of white light that abruptly exploded as a light barrier. The explosive force generated as a result propelled him into the distance, thereby allowing him to evade the direct trajectory of Tang Wulin's path of regal domination. However, just because he was able to evade it didn't mean everyone else could as well. Around a dozen Spirit Pagoda soul masters had arrived on the scene, and they immediately suffered a gruesome fate. Tang Wulin's path of regal domination seemed to be releasing a burst of invisible suction force that drew in all of the Spirit Pagoda soul masters within a range of several dozens of meters. These soul masters were then all reduced to golden statues before exploding into nothingness. Arahang had always thought that his own battle methods were already quite violent, but what Tang Wulin was currently putting on display could no longer just be referred to as violent. It was borderline deranged. Even his closest friends were only seeing seeing this side of him for the very first time, and they were slightly rooted to the spot, which prevented them from working together with him from the get-go. In any case, the current Tang Wuling didn't seem to require any assistance anyway. The golden path continued to linger in the air, and Tang Wuling's massive body sprang up before crashing into a purple mecha. The mecha was instantly stained golden in color before it was torn apart and thrown aside like a rag doll by Tang Wuling's left golden dragon claw. Yue's Hang Yu gulped in at the sight of Tang Wuling's rampage. Is this what boss fights like when he's serious? Love dub, love dub, love dub. A powerful heartbeat rang out from Arahang's body, and he thumped himself vigorously on the chest while the sound of the heartbeat struck all of the oncoming Spirit Pagoda Soul Masters with a sense of disorientation. The two tidal Douluos were stopped in their tracks by him, and he immediately attacked them with his massive fists. A dazzling saber projection flashed up above like a bolt of lightning, and a tidal Douluo who attempted to attack Tang Wuling from the side was instantly sent flying. Sima Jinkai and Arahang were both still only tidal Douluos, but they already possessed Hyper Douluo level combat prowess. The Spirit Pagoda had a total of 7 tidal Douluos on the scene, but the only Hyper Douluo among their ranks was the branch chairman, and over half of them had been stopped in their tracks by Sima Jinkai and Arahang. Yuan and Yui and Yuzinglan had also released their suits of battle armor. Domain halos appeared beneath their feet, reflecting the complete suits of 3-word battle armor that they were wearing. Yuan and Yui's suit of 3-word battle armor was yellowish-brown in color, and had a very heavy and sturdy appearance. She was wielding a pair of giant hammers, and these weapons were truly gigantic. Even in her Titan giant ape form, the hammers were disproportionately massive, and they appeared to be of a similar size to the Mega War hammers that Tang Wuling had once obtained, except the metals used and the method through which they were crafted were completely different. Tang Wuling had expended a lot of effort on Yuan and Yui's hammers, and just sourcing a sufficient amount of metal for them had been quite a tall order. If it weren't for the support in resources offered to them by the Tang sect, there was no way that he could have completed the hammers, and they weren't actually a part of the designs for Yuan and Yui's suit of 3-word battle armor to begin with. The two hammers were 8 meters in length each, and their diameters were 3.5 meters. They had been constructed from a type of siderite, and their most prominent trait lay in their weight. This type of siderite wasn't particularly precious, but a vast amount of it had been used to construct the pair of hammers. The two hammers contained a total of 7 tons of this material, and the main function of their internal core circuits was to nullify the detrimental effect their enormous weight had on Yuan and Yui's control over them. Due to the sheer size of the hammers, she could only use them in her Titan giant ape form. The core circuits of the hammers also significantly bolstered how resolute they were, and according to the calculations of the Tang sect's mega makers, these two giant hammers possess sufficient defensive prowess to allow them to survive direct attacks from all soul missiles at or below the 7th grade. The hammers only had a single offensive special effect, obliteration. All physical matter struck by the hammers would have to endure the explosive might of this special effect, and that made the hammers truly fearsome weapons of destruction. They weren't divine weapons, but on a battlefield, particularly one that included mechas, they were even more effective than the average divine weapon. The main weapons crafted by the Tang sect's mega makers for Yuan and Yui's black mecha were also a pair of giant hammers. At this moment, she was swinging her hammers toward a tidal Douluo while hurtling toward him with unstoppable force, and the tidal Douluo was struck by a sense of asphyxiation, as if the surrounding air were about to be shattered. As a result, he hurriedly flew backward in a panicked retreat, not daring to face her attacks head-on. Yuzinglan's suit of battle armor was of a bright silver color, and there seemed to be countless stars shimmering within the dazzling crystalline metal. Her star god sword glowed the brightest of all, and specks of starlight erupted around her before surging toward her opponent's saber martial soul. This tidal Douluo was only a 2-word battle armor master, and the disparity between their suits of battle armor compensated for the gap in their cultivation ranks. However, Yuzinglan's understanding of the way of the sword was far superior to before. It was as if she had transformed into starlight that had surrounded her opponent, rendering him completely unable to escape. Don't judge a bun by its folds. Shu Lizzie's 7th soul ring suddenly lit up, and he transformed into a massive steamer before rapidly rotating on the spot, sending one purplish-black destructive explosive bun after another flying toward the surrounding enemies with unerring accuracy. It was also at this moment that dazzling starlight erupted, and streaks of starlight appeared in the perfect places to cut off the Spirit Pagoda's oncoming reinforcements. Several kilometers away, Li Yang was standing on the top floor of the tallest building in Spirit Wave City, spectating this battle from afar. He was a veteran member of the Tang sect, so he had naturally cultivated the purple demon eyes, and he had already mastered the 3rd stage. Hence, despite the fact that he was so far away, the battle was virtually unfolding right before his eyes as far as he was concerned. His eyelids twitched involuntarily at the sight of the Spirit Pagoda branch chairman detonating his own power to propel himself away from Tang Wuling. As expected, he really was no ordinary soul sage. What kind of aura was this? Even from several kilometers away, he could sense the terrifying aggression, and the dazzling golden light was almost too scintillating to behold. Even this old rival of his had been frightened into retreat. The Spirit Pagoda's branch chairman was the heir Douluo, Huatao. He and Li Yan had been rivals for many years, and even though Li Yan had constantly managed to maintain an upper hand throughout their rivalry, the advantage he held was far from a decisive one. Chapter 1260. Huatao possessed rank 96 soul power, which was only slightly inferior to that of Li Yan. Furthermore, he possessed an extremely rare martial soul in the form of air control, which allowed him to battle through air manipulation. Not only did he possess extremely powerful combat prowess, he was also an assault and control system soul master. His control over air had been honed to near perfection, and his signature attacks included the likes of air cannon and airbind. What he had just used was another one of his soul skills, air repulse, except he had used it on himself, rather than his opponent as he normally would. He was blasting himself back in order to forcibly evade Tang Wuling's attack, and Li Yan was extremely astonished to see this, precisely because he was aware of just how powerful Huatao was. This young Tang sect master truly was something else. However, their original plan didn't involve directly combating the Spirit Pagoda. Could it be that he was planning to destroy the Spirit Pagoda branch? Regardless of how much the Dou Spirit Empire disliked them, this was still the Spirit Pagoda. They needed the Spirit Pagoda to provide the soul masters of their empire with sufficient soul spirits to support their cultivation. If the Spirit Pagoda were to be destroyed, then the ramifications were certainly going to be far from minor. He didn't know what had caused Tang Wuling to go berserk like this, but he was powerless to do anything in this situation. All he could do was look on as everything unfolded before his eyes, and do his best to minimize the role that the Tang sect played in this incident. At the very least, he couldn't allow any members of the Tang sect to appear on the scene. It seemed that Tang Wuling and his friends were doing quite well on their own anyway, so that wouldn't be an issue. In reality, this battle was a very satisfying one for Li Yan to behold. He had held a grudge against the Spirit Pagoda for a long time, and his discontent toward them had reached a boiling point following the bombing of the Tang sect headquarters. Now that Tang Wuling and his friends were laying waste to the Spirit Pagoda headquarters, he was struck by a sense of vindictive satisfaction. At this moment, Tang Wuling suddenly became even more fearsome. His body expanded even further, and a massive golden dragon tail appeared behind him. The enormous tail swept horizontally through the air, sending a pair of mechas flying with devastating force. A pair of dragon horns then sprouted out of his head as he let loose a painful roar. This didn't seem to be his martial soul true body. Instead, it was as if his body were truly morphing into that of a dragon. Following the emergence of the dragon horns, Tang Wuling's aura became extremely unstable and violent to the extreme. His eyes were completely of a bright red color, and there seemed to be boundless violent intent struggling to erupt out of his body. He turned toward Douluo Huatao, who was rushing toward Tang Wuling from afar, and he pointed his golden dragon spear at Huatao before hurtling directly toward him. Huatao was currently feeling extremely enraged and frustrated. Never in the history of this branch of the Spirit Pagoda had they ever been dealt such a heavy blow, and what was even more infuriating to him was that he had no idea where this group of powerful beings had come from. Judging from their powers and abilities, he could tell that he had never encountered any of them before. So why were they suddenly attacking the Spirit Pagoda? Could it be that they were targeting members of the Holy Spirit cult? If the Holy Spirit cult members in the secret underground research facility had been exposed, then the Spirit Pagoda was going to be in a lot of trouble. Hence, right after he struggled free from Tang Wuling's path of regal domination, the first thing that he considered was how to minimize losses for the Spirit Pagoda in the aftermath of this incident. This was the Spirit Pagoda headquarters, so he wasn't concerned for his own safety. The sirens had already been activated, and the Spirit Pagoda branches in the nearby few cities would already have been notified of this situation. In less than an hour, over 200 mechas would be deployed to the scene, and no matter how powerful these people were, they would eventually be worn down and killed. However, he was feeling rather fearful of the golden-scaled leader of this group. His aura was simply far too powerful, and the extraordinarily devastating blood essence fluctuations emanating from his body didn't even seem to belong to a human. As such, he was completely completely unable to ascertain Tang Wulin's exact cultivation rank. In the face of the oncoming Tang Wulin, Hu Tao circled his arms in front of himself, and one of his soul rings lit up, causing the surrounding air to become extremely viscous, creating an invisible cage around Tang Wulin. Tang Wulin felt as if all of the air around him were compressing toward his body in an attempt to limit his movements. He felt as if he were being rejected by heaven and earth, and ejected out of this world. In the face of such an attack from Hu Tao, it would be quite normal for a weaker soul master to have their body completely crushed. However, this naturally wasn't applicable to Tang Wulin. As his violent aura continued to proliferate from his body, his golden dragon spear suddenly turned transparent, and countless streaks of golden light erupted from the spear, tearing through the surrounding air, then surged directly toward Hu Tao. Hu Tao swung his arms to the side, and a burst of enormous force wound itself around Tang Wulin before attempting to send him flying. But brownish yellow light suddenly flashed from his body, and his mountain dragon king torso bone abruptly increased gravity by tenfold, thereby forcibly holding him in place. He then flapped his wings violently, and fearsome dragon's might erupted forth in a frenzy. Roar! This was the most powerful golden dragon roar that Tang Wulin had unleashed, and it was filled with savagery and violence. Not only were all of the soul masters present with dragon-type martial souls heavily affected, all those who possessed beast martial souls were struck by the urge to fall to the ground and bow their heads in subordination. Meanwhile, a large ship had just docked on the distant coast of the Dou Spirit Empire, and a silver-haired woman on the ship seemed to have sensed something. She abruptly raised her head with a stunned look in her eyes, and in the next instant, silver light appeared over her entire body, following which she vanished into thin air. Hu Tao felt as if his aura were being completely dominated. He felt like he was facing a primordial beast rather than a human, and even as a hyper Douluo, his powers had been severely handicapped in the face of this devastating aura. He didn't dare to face this attack head on, and he detonated the air again, blasting him back over 100 meters in a flash. Right at this moment, a golden streak of light passed right through where he had been standing just a moment ago, tearing through space and leaving a black gash in the air. As opposed to setting off in pursuit of Hu Tao, Tang Wulin suddenly shot forth directly toward the spirit pagoda like a golden cannonball. At this moment, he resembled a golden shooting star, and at the same time, a massive tyrant dragon appeared out of thin air. The tyrant dragon's body was covered in dark golden scales, and its height had already exceeded 75 meters. The relatively tiny dragon wings on its back had become a lot larger than before, and what was even more terrifying was that its head had also enlarged dramatically. It opened its cavernous mouth and blasted a jet of golden flames directly toward the spirit pagoda building. My god! Is he trying to destroy the spirit pagoda? A hint of astonishment appeared on Hu Tao's face, and he immediately charged toward Tang Wulin like lightning, putting the spirit pagoda above his own safety. However, it was already too late. Tang Wulin crashed viciously into the side of the spirit pagoda building, and countless pieces of rubble flew in all directions amid a resounding boom. A gargantuan crater with a diameter of over 10 meters was blown into the side of the spirit pagoda building, and Tang Wulin raised his right hand to unleash his golden dragon shocks the heavens. A giant golden dragon surged directly into the spirit pagoda through the crater that had just been created, and a string of explosive booms quickly rang out. At the same time, an enormous wave of air swept up Tang Wulin's body and sent him flying. At this point, Hu Tao was at the height of his rage. He no longer cared about where these people had come from. All he wanted was to destroy them. Ever since the spirit pagoda had been founded, no one had ever dared to attack one of its branches in such a blatant and brazen manner. Hu Tao's body quickly turned transparent as he became a part of the air. This was his martial soul true body, air. At the same time, he donned his suit of three-word battle armor, which was also transparent. The surrounding air suddenly became dense and heavy, and there seemed to be countless clouds swirling within it. Not only did this dense air encompass Tang Wulin, it had settled over the entire battlefield. Immediately thereafter, he released his three-word battle armor domain, air domain. This domain was different from the vast majority of three-word battle armor domains as it was a massive domain field. It wasn't all that powerful, but it encompassed a massive area that was thrice as large as that of the average three-word battle armor domain. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.